Well, good morning, church family. We are in our fourth week of our I Will series, and today's sermon is I Will Pray. We've talked about being a functioning church member. We've talked about being a unifying church member. We've talked about that we won't make church about our preferences and our desires. And today is I Will Pray. Specifically, I will pray for my church leaders. I need your prayers. I want your prayers. And listen, today as we go through this, I'm gonna give you some truth about Ryan Cripps. Struggles that Ryan Cripps has. I feel that people are impacted by the gospel the most when the man of God is willing to share where he struggles. I don't have to give you total specifics or anything like that, but I need to let you know that where you're struggling, I'm struggling right there alongside of you. And today, we're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. If you want to go ahead and turn there. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. Let me just tell you something. It has been a dream of mine to pastor a church for a long time. I surrendered the gospel in 2012. Almost immediately, I became a youth pastor at the church I grew up in. Fast forward about 3 years, and I am moving on to another church, Grace Baptist Church in Murfreesboro. I was youth pastor there for about a year and a half before my title was changed to associate pastor. And then, of course, I came to Irving College. My first Sunday was June 30th of 2019, so I've been there almost a year. And let me just tell you something. Pastoring the church, actually being the lead pastor, is a lot different than being the youth pastor or the associate pastor. A lot more responsibility, a lot more to be concerned about. You know, a lot more that God places on your plate to deal with. And, just got to be responsible about it. But listen, that's why I need your prayers. And I want to go through 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7 today, just to tell you what is expected from a pastor, okay? The qualifications for a pastor. And before I jump in there and read this to you this morning, I want to explain something to you. No man meets the qualifications of a pastor. What do you mean, Ryan? No man meets the qualifications. This is what I mean. Every man should strive to live up to the qualifications of a pastor. But every man is going to fail in these areas in some form or fashion throughout his life. There is no perfect man. Therefore, there is no perfect pastor. But listen, these qualifications were given to us to try to live up to them, so that we could be the best that we could possibly be for God. Now we're going to look at 1 Timothy, like I said, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, so I hope you got your Bible, but I will read it to you. It says, "This saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be an overseer, he desires a noble work. An overseer, therefore, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, self-controlled, sensible, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not an excessive drinker, not a bully, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not greedy. He must manage his own household competently and have his children under control with all dignity. If anyone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of God's church? He must not be a new convert, or he might become conceited and incur the same condemnation as the devil. Furthermore, he must have a good reputation among outsiders, so that he does not fall into disgrace and the devil's trap." So we're going to look at these very in depth this morning. If you see me looking over, it's because I'm looking at my notes on my computer. But let's just go back to verse 1. It says, "This saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be an overseer," if any man, and I want you to get that this morning. Ladies, nothing against you, but if any man desires to be an overseer, a pastor. The word overseer here could be pastor. It could mean bishop. You hear some churches use the word bishop for their pastor, but we use the word Baptist. I mean the word pastor. We use the word pastor where we're at in the Baptist church. It says that if a man desires to be a pastor, that he desires, he wants, he craves to have a noble work, an excellent calling. He desires to do good work for the Lord. Okay? And this is what verse 2 says. It says, an overseer, a pastor, must be above reproach. A pastor must be above reproach. The word reproach means fault finding. So it means that a pastor must be above anyone finding fault in him. Well, let me just tell you, this is one area where I struggle with, because listen, I want to admit to you this morning, I make mistakes. I think you know that. But listen, when I was younger, I had this idea that pastors had sin figured out and they didn't sin, and that sin was just for us church members. That's not true. The pastor sins too. So listen, I have my faults. And if you went looking for them, you would find them. But I am supposed to live in such a way that my faults just don't stick out to the world. I don't go out here and just openly sin so that the world can see it and know, okay, that's where Ryan struggles. A pastor must be above anyone finding fault in him. Now, are you going to find fault in your pastor at times? Absolutely. You are. They're human. But their lifestyle should not be one where it's just constant failure after failure after failure. This next part of this verse, in verse 2, some of you may not agree with me. I'm going to take a stand this morning. It's something I truly believe in. And some people probably will not agree with me. But this next part of this verse says that a pastor must be the husband of one wife. We have, for many, many years, taken this verse, this part of this verse, to mean that if a man is divorced, he cannot be a pastor. That's not what that says. It says he must be the husband of one wife. Paul was a very educated man. If Paul meant divorced, I believe Paul would have said divorced. It says the husband of one wife. At this time in history, many people in this culture had multiple wives. And Paul is saying that if you're going to be a pastor, you can't have more than one. You can have one, but you can't have more than one. If Paul meant divorce, I truly believe Paul would have said, hey, a pastor must not be divorced. That's not what he said. And I know some of you are not going to agree with that. Some of you are going to be so thankful that somebody finally spoke up and said it. But listen, if you study the Greek, it means a one-woman type man. So that means that the wife that a pastor has, he needs to be faithful to her. A pastor should not be the flirtatious type. You shouldn't see him going up to women and flirting with them. That should not be his. That should not be a predisposition of his life, that he be a flirtatious person. The next part says self-controlled. Self-controlled. Am I able to control myself? Keep myself from doing things that I shouldn't do? I'll struggle in this area. Sometimes I struggle very much in this area. Sometimes I have to have help keeping myself in check. I have to talk to somebody before I say stuff. Sometimes, because it may not come out in the nicest way, or in the most loving way. And sometimes I just spit out whatever comes to mind. And see, that's not practicing good self-control. That is one area that I really have to work on. Sensible. Does a pastor, does a pastor make good, wise decisions, or is he erratic? Does he make decisions that are not good for the greater good of the church? I try to be sensible. I talk to Matthew, I talk to Mickey, I talk to different ones, and I ask, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I feel like the Lord's leading us to do. What do you think? I try to get opinions. I try to get some wise counsel. Because sometimes I don't think the whole thing out. I'm human. I don't see the whole end of it. I don't see beginning, middle, and end, and maybe they can see out a little further and, oh, this is how this might work out. I have to have some help sometimes so I can make good, sensible decisions. Respectable. Do I respect others? Do people respect me? Do I give them a good example to follow? If I don't, I'm doing the wrong thing. I hope and pray that I am a good example to each and every one of you. I pray that I make the right decisions that God is pleased with, that you can follow and think, that's what Brother Ryan's doing, I can do it too. I hope and pray that I am respectable in that manner. Hospitable. I really feel like I'm a really hospitable person. I like to welcome new people to our congregation. I love meeting the visitors that come. Hey, I've met pastors who could care less about who's in their church. I care. I want you there. I want visitors there. And you gotta have hospitable spirit. Go up, welcome them, thank them for coming. Treat them with all kinds of respect. Last part of that verse says, able to teach. I do not know what you think about my teaching or my preaching, but here's what I hope you get at the end of the day from my teaching and preaching, is that Ryan is willing to admit that he's a sinner and that he makes mistakes. And I hope by me admitting my struggles that it helps you desire to want to help start overcoming your own struggles. Because when I know that somebody else is going through something similar, it helps me with my own situation. So I hope that I'm helping you by admitting that I have struggles too. So I feel like that's what is good about my teaching. I'm not bragging, because there's times I worry and wonder, what do you all really think when you hear me preach and teach? But I think a good part of what I do is when I share that I struggle, it helps you know that you're not in this alone. Verse 3, not an excessive drinker. Pastors are not supposed to be excessive drinkers. We could argue day and night for the next 6 months on what that part of that verse means. Let me just tell you what it means for me. If a pastor doesn't drink at all, then he does not have to worry about being an excessive drinker. He doesn't have to worry about being an excessive drinker. Personally, I do not drink. The most alcohol I consume in a year's time is the few times a year that I have to take some kind of cough syrup that it's in that. NyQuil, something like that. That's the strongest this old boy is drinking, okay? So I want you to know that I'm not out here drinking and liquoring it up with anybody. I'm not an excessive drinker because I'm not drinking at all. Unless you're talking about some tea or some Mountain Dew now, I might be in trouble. Not a bully, but gentle. Pastor shouldn't bully people into stuff. He should be gentle in his approach. I'll be honest with you, I even think about this when I'm giving invitation. I don't want to bully anybody into choosing Jesus. I got to be gentle about it, but I do want to do everything I can, humanly speaking, to drive somebody to Jesus. But I got to remember, I can't bully them into it. I got to be gentle with it, and I try not to bully people. I try to be gentle in my approach. I shouldn't try to persuade people over to my way of thinking, and I try not to do that. I try to hear everybody's point of view on stuff, and then give my point of view of what I feel like the Lord wants me to say, and go with that. But, I guess I can struggle in that way sometimes, especially when I'm giving an invitation. I think, am I trying to bully these people into getting saved? But, you know what? It's only because I love them. And if that's wrong, I guess I'll just have to be wrong because I want people to know Jesus. Not quarrelsome. Not quarrelsome. I struggle with this one. I could argue with a fence post, just to be honest with you. I could argue with a fence post. But one that wants to stir up trouble, no. Not me. I hate confrontation. I hate drama. I'll be honest with you, the last 3 or 4 months at church have been amazing. We've had no conflict. We've had no drama. And that's awesome. That is awesome. So I try not to be a quarrelsome person. But like I said, I can argue with a fence post if needed. Not greedy. Pastors should not be greedy. It's nice to have stuff. I like the money that I earn from my job and from the church, but I shouldn't be greedy. And I try not to be greedy. I try to share what the Lord's blessed me with. And I don't care to tell you, I tithe. Casey and I tithe. Each week we tithe. We give our tenth to the Lord. You may say, well, Brother Ryan, I don't see you put nothing in the offering plate every week. Well, that's because Brother Ryan has some timers and forgets to bring his check or stop by the ATM. But I do make it up. If you just got to verify that I make it up, you ask Mickey or Miss Sue, and they'll verify that I make up my tithe. But try not to be greedy. Okay, pastors shouldn't be greedy. Verse 4 and 5 says, he must manage his own household competently and have his children under control with all dignity. If anyone does not know how to manage his own household, how would he take care of God's church? A pastor should have a really good home life. No family's perfect, granted, but the pastor and his family should be an example to everybody. There should be respect for the pastor in his home. He should be teaching his children how to follow the Lord. And he should be leading them down the right path. And I think most pastors are. Don't get me wrong. But if a pastor has no control in his own home, like if he can't manage his house the way that God would have him manage his house, if nobody shows him respect in his home, if his children act like a bunch of yahoos, then guess what? How can he manage the church? How can he handle God's church if he can't even handle what's going on in his own home? I pray that Casey and I are an example to you all. We are not perfect people by no means, but I hope we're an example to you. But not only that, I hope that when we have children one day, that the Lord will guide me on how to raise those children to love Him and to serve Him. And I'm just going to go ahead and be really, really honest with you right now. If I'm going to be a knucklehead and not lead them to love the Lord and to serve Him, which I don't know why I wouldn't, but let's just say for some reason I went nuts and I didn't, and I wasn't going to raise them right, I pray He doesn't give me any children. Because I don't want to bring any child into this world and not help them know to love God and to serve Him. Verse 6, he must not be a new convert, or he might become conceited and incur the same condemnation as the devil. The devil's issue was pride. The devil's issue was pride. And if a man who is a new convert, a new Christian, becomes a pastor too soon, he might become prideful. He might become to the point that he thinks, I did something. No, it's about what Jesus did. And Jesus died on the cross for us. And Jesus rose again. It's not about you and me. So, sometimes pastors can get prideful. Don't get me wrong. There's times over the years that I've led somebody to the Lord and I thought, I did something good. It wasn't me. It was Jesus. Jesus saved him. I just brought him to Him. But I could get prideful at times. And that could be what could happen here. Last verse. He must have a good reputation among outsiders so that he does not fall into disgrace and the devil's trap. A pastor he must live in such a way that even the non-Christians in the community still have respect for him. That they still realize, hey, this is a really good man. I may not agree with him. I may not go to his church, but he's a good man. And it says there that unless they fall into the devil's trap. Let me just say this. The devil is looking to destroy any man that wants to serve the Lord. Any man that wants to pastor a church, preach the gospel, the devil is looking for a way to destroy him. And he will do anything possible to do that. You may say, why did you tell us all that today, Brother Ryan? Why did you admit some of your faults? Why this message today? Well, one, it was the next study from I Am a Church Member. I will pray for my church leaders, but I need your prayers. Like I said earlier, pastoring a church, being the lead pastor, is different than when I was a youth pastor, different than when I was an associate pastor. Being the lead pastor means a lot more falls on my shoulders, and I'm responsible to God for a lot more. And I need your prayers. Prayers that, you know what, I will live above fault finding. Prayers that, that I won't fall into the devil's trap of sin. Prayers that, hey, those areas I told you I struggled with during the message, that I won't struggle with them as much. I'm human. I'm going to struggle with them till the day I die, but that I won't struggle with them as much. But the most important thing you can do for me is pray that the devil will leave me alone as much as possible, and that I can serve God with a clear conscience and with a heart that just desires to serve Him. I love you. I love each and every one of you, and I'm glad you tuned in today. And I hope I'll see you again real soon. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.